Oh, there he is.
Looking good, Mr. Barber.
How you guys doing, man?
We are doing great. We are doing much better now that you are here. We're excited to see you.
Likewise, man. Likewise.
So we have got a full crowd here of pretty amazing people. So I know Tiki's crazy busy, and I know you guys are as well. So I am going to kick it off. Welcome to another Something New Conversations with our Legends series. So we've had some pretty incredible people on, and I am incredibly blessed to have a good friend and somebody who I consider a mentor, Tiki Barber. So I have seen Tiki perform in thigh pads and in thigh highs as Don in Kinky Boots, which you can see behind him. So you talk about versatility, whether it's Broadway or on the field, Tiki has done it all. I'm going to give a brief introduction. I'm assuming everybody knows Tiki. He's a legend. He's the New York Giants all-time leading rusher. He's in the Ring of Honor. He should definitely be in the Hall of Fame. That's a discussion for later, and Rondé should be as well. He is one of only 3 players to rush for 10,000 yards and have 5,000 receiving. I think he had the 3rd most highest total of total yards from scrimmage in NFL history. He's a TV and radio host. He's an entrepreneur. He's an amazing guy. His son, AJ, congratulations to AJ. He just committed to Pierre DuPont, who's on the call. He committed to Pierre's alma mater, Princeton, and he'll be playing football there next year.
Actually, funny point there. My son went to UVA.
So oh, nice. Nice. There you go. You flip.
There you go. There you go. So we're blessed to have Tiki on today, talk a little football, talk entrepreneurship, talk Broadway, whatever we want. So I'm really excited and grateful. Tiki, it's been a long time. I haven't seen you in a while.
I haven't seen you in person in a really long time. We miss our live and unfiltered Thuzio events, which is a company that I started about 6 or 7 years ago. As we evolved in the world of influencer marketing, it led us to doing events, live events with legends of sports and entertainment. And now we have 8 cities that we host in, New York and Los Angeles being a few, Dallas, Boston, in Philadelphia even. We go down there, and at least I brave it every now and then, but only when I get to talk to someone like Allen Iverson. And Scott has been a part of it since the very beginning. So I appreciate his loyalty to our budding brand. And now that we have been stuck inside for the last 26 weeks or whatever it's been, we've been pushed into a virtual realm, which, just like this Zoom conference that we're having right now, has really allowed us to expand our business and have a new offering that we didn't necessarily consider until we had to consider it. But that's just evolution. That's taking advantage of opportunities, which, as Scott was mentioning, is something that I've always done in my life. Some of you may or may not know my background, but I'm from Roanoke, Virginia, which is Southwest Virginia. It used to be the Star City of the South. There's actually a huge star in the middle of it too, and I'm not even joking. But it kind of slowed down a little bit, and it's still a nice little town. But I had to get out of there, and I did by going a little bit north to the University of Virginia, where I studied management information systems and was really a geek. I wanted to be an astronaut, but football got in the way. But when I came to New York, I saw this massive platform of opportunities to do all kinds of different things, whether it was in media, obviously in sports, but philanthropy and meeting the right people to help me become an entrepreneur. And I've prided myself in never saying no. Now, it doesn't mean I don't fail, because I fail often, but I never say no. And I think it's led me to a few just really amazing experiences. One you were joking about, but really this Broadway show that I did for 7.5 weeks last year called Kinky Boots kind of changed my existence. It changed my view of the world and society. And being on the Great White Way and performing and making people stand up and cheer and sing Just Be, was one of the great experiences of my life. So that's me in a nutshell. I have 6 kids. I consider Thuzio my 7th. She's my baby, but I have 6 kids. My oldest is 18, and as Scott mentioned, he's heading to Princeton after his senior high school season. And I have my youngest is 4. So I go the gamut of children. So I've done a lot, and I hope to still do a whole lot more.
Yeah, you are amazing, and the things that you can do are limitless. So also for anyone who has not been on one of these calls, the beauty of these is that it's certainly, it's great to hear backstory and things like that. I think the beauty is that these are totally interactive. If you've got a question, unless you're a Cowboys fan, then you can hop off now. Those are for you to ask Tiki. I wanted to get started. I've got a question for you, Tiki. So I think 96, 97, you graduated from Virginia.
Yep, 1997.
Second round draft pick. 5'10", 200 pound running back. And you become arguably one of the most dominant running backs of your era. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think when people look back with skewed glasses, that is history's glasses, you'll say, man, you must have been great from the very beginning. In fact, I wasn't. I got hurt early in my career. The Giants tried to replace me, whether it was Sean Bennett. If any Giants fans remember him, he's a white running back from Evanston. He was fun. I loved him. But they tried to replace me with him, Joe Montgomery from Ohio State, and then ultimately they drafted Ron Dane. And so every year I was challenged, and every year I was fighting for my basically football existence, because I didn't get it. I didn't understand how to stay healthy. I didn't understand the minutia, the intricacies of the game. But then in 2000, after we drafted Ron, I got help, right? I got helped, I should say, by an offensive coordinator who saw a skill set in me that wasn't being utilized, and that was Sean Payton. He's obviously now the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, and we started doing a bunch of misdirection plays. I don't know if you guys remember these from the early 2000s. We'd bunch 3 wide receivers and throw tosses, but then do cut back power plays the other side, and he'd use me out of the backfield as a wide receiver, and all of a sudden I rushed for 1,000 yards, and I was on my way. People, interestingly, they always think about Ron, and they say, oh, Ron didn't have a good NFL career. Ron Dane's problem was that he came to New York right when I got good. If it had been a year earlier, he probably would have been the starting running back and maybe had been a 10,000-yard rusher. But he came to New York when I figured it out, so to speak, and my career took off from there. Here's an interesting stat, too. Scott mentioned the 10,000 yards rushing and 5,000 yards receiving, but in my last 3 years, I had as many rushing yards as I did in my first 7. So I was a late bloomer, and I got out before it really damaged me. But more importantly, when I found other things that interested me. So how did it happen? It was a lot of luck. It was a ton of hard work. But it was being in the right place at the right time with the right team and the right teammates. And even though I don't like to, I give credit to Tom Coughlin because he made me focus on the details.
Yeah, your career was unbelievable. So I'm going to throw a trivia question out to everybody, and if you get it right, I will either give you one of Tiki's books. So Tiki and his brother have written a number of children's books. So these are autographed by Tiki. I'll give you one of those, or a Standing O book, which Tiki is prominently on the cover. So in 2006, if I'm correct, Tiki, you rushed for 234 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, what team were they playing and whose record did he break? Anybody?
Oh,
Everybody's muted, so make sure you jump off.
They were playing the Redskins.
Yeah, they played the risks for sure. I don't know who record.
Bingo. Whose
I don't even
record
know
did
whose.
he
I don't
break?
even know whose record it was.
Nobody?
Rondé?
I don't even know, Scott.
Rodney Hampton's record.
That is a very good guess. So he broke, and this is apparently news to him as well. He broke Tiki Barber's record.
Oh, that
so
record.
he-
Oh, rushing in a season. I knew that. Of
He already
course.
no, you were rushing in a game. You
Oh, in
broke
a
your
game.
own record.
Gotcha.
So in 06 with 234 against the Redskins, you had set it the year before against Kansas City.
That's right. That's right.
So-
And you forgot the 3 touchdowns. An
And the
interesting
3
story.
touchdowns.
An interesting story about that game. So that was my last regular season game of my career, and everybody knew it was my last regular season game. And so there was a police officer who was from Bergen County, I believe, who, I don't know, I don't know how much money he spent to get these tickets, but he was sitting right in the end zone. And I saw him when I was warming up. So we're warming up on the field, you just scan the whatever with the fans and I see this giant fan right there. And I'm like, that can't be his seats. He just must be sitting there to watch us warm up. And so when the game started, he was actually still sitting there. So I was like, oh, this guy, spent some money, for these seats. And so the first touchdown I scored, I remember it was a cutback off the left side. I almost tripped up, but I kept my balance and I ran into the end zone. And I saw him right there. So I gave him that football. And just because he was a Giants fan in this sea of Washington fans. And then at first I was like, oh shit, I just gave him that football. What if I don't score another touchdown? This is my last game. Luckily I scored 2 more. And so I was able to keep a couple of those footballs. But about 3 weeks later, I was at the stadium. The season's over, so I was at the stadium, and Ronnie Barnes, who is our head trainer, he gives me this football, and he's like, XYZ cop. He went to this game, and you gave him this ball. He wants you to sign it. And so I, obviously in retrospect, I was like, man. So I signed it, to whatever this police officer's name was. Thanks for coming to support me in my last game. Tiki Barber, 234 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, and this was the first one. It's kind of a cool piece of
That's
memorabilia that this
Very
guy
cool.
has, because he just happened to be sitting right at the end zone when I scored that first touchdown.
So that's fascinating to me, Tiki, that when you're playing at that level, that you're noticing people in the stands. It almost reminds me of that famous story about Montana in the Super Bowl, and they're driving for the winning score, and he sees, I think it's John Candy or something, and he makes the whole huddle crack up.
Yeah.
So you guys actually notice things like that. That's
Only
a-
sometimes.
Okay.
There's some moments of clairvoyance. There's I can remember I played in Green Bay just one time in my career, and I happened to have a good day that game. In fact, we won the game because Brett got hurt, and their backup, Doug Peterson, who's now the Eagles head coach, threw an interception at the end of the game. And so, but we ended up winning that game. And I remember I had a long touchdown run in that game. And for whatever reason, as soon as I got through the hole, I had this sense of people standing and oh, it's about to happen. You know what I mean? And so sometimes you feel it, sometimes you don't.
Right.
But I do like to pay attention sometimes, unless I'm in Philly and I like to ignore everybody.
So obviously with Tiki's background as an entrepreneur, as a TV and radio host, as an unbelievable athlete, there are just a million questions that you can ask him. I want to open it up to the group. And if you've got a question for Tiki, just take yourself off of mute and fire away.
so
Who's first?
So, Tiki, this is great to hear these comments, and you're clearly an incredibly thoughtful, dynamic, and optimistic person, which I think
Very.
is pretty cool. So sorry to bring it away from sports into something that's sort of a bit of a downer question, but you look at the craziness that's going on in the world today because of COVID.
That's
and
right.
forget the political crap. Let's not get into that dimension. Get that, But
Yeah.
from COVID, I mean, the world is obviously changing a lot. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what do you think something positive comes out of it in the couple year time frame, and what's something negative that comes out of in a couple
Yeah,
years?
I think it's a very interesting question. I haven't thought about it, so this is coming off the top of my head. I will tie slightly political for a second. So, when Memorial Day happened and George Floyd was murdered, we were all sitting at home, right? There was nothing dividing our interests. There was nothing that could distract us from what was to become the racial reckoning that's happening in this country, right? And I think one of the positives of the coronavirus, even though it's not necessarily related, is that we were presented with this massive moment in history at a time when we could all accept it, right? We could all process it. We could all think about it, get angry about it, try to change or try to be conciliatory. Whatever your emotion was, it was visceral, but it was happening because we were idle. And so in some ways, this change that is forced, just to bring it back to sports, the Washington football team to change their name, that has allowed the NFL and Roger Goodell to change their stance on the Colin Kaepernick-like issue, for the NBA and for the NHL even to start an inclusion program. The NHL started an inclusion program. I mean, I can't even name a black hockey player, right? So all of this happened because we were all idle during this moment of reckoning in our country. So that's a positive from this, and I think it's lasting, right? I think it's something that's not going to go away when the world gets back to normal. We're all forced to think more deeply, even me, more deeply about what equality is, what equity is, and there's a difference there. I did a seminar with Stephen Ross's Ross Institute for Sports and Equity, and they ask a very simple question. What's the difference between equality and equity? Now, equality is giving everybody the same thing. So, and they used an example of people trying to look over a fence to watch a game. A tall man is standing there. He can look over the fence without having this piece of equality. There's a girl in the middle who needs that extra stoop to see over the fence. And then there's a little kid who has that same box, but he still can't see. Equality is giving everyone that same box, but what equity is giving everyone what they need. So this tall guy, he doesn't need the box. So he has to sacrifice, or he voluntarily sacrifices his resource to give it to the kid who now needs 2 boxes. And so there's this very slight difference that I wouldn't have thought about or looked into if it hadn't been for what's happening in the world. So that's a positive for this. I think the negative is that there is going to be a lot of downstream health issues that we just don't know. It's going to surface 10 years from now, and people who are otherwise healthy are going to see the residual of the coronavirus from a health standpoint. So those are the things that worry me.
Very impressive answer. Thank you.
Hey, Tiki, it's Mike Barron. Great to meet you. And, you said we'll say something politically for a minute. I agree. The whole politics side is a cluster in itself because everything.
Oh, there was a fight in my backyard about it last night. I was like, what are you guys talking about?
Well, it was 100 in Denver yesterday, and it's 36 and snowing today. So maybe the world's ending. I don't know. But
I don't know.
Your analogy is a fantastic one. And I think if some people would look at the subtleties, the subtle differences, then they would at least lower their shoulders and have reasonable conversations with people.
That's right.
So speaking of controversial topics, what's your take, having played for so many years, what's your take about CTE these days? And is enough being done? Are they taking care of youths, especially as they grow up to be an adult like yourself and be healthy and have your faculties together at your age?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So I remember when this first hit the National Football League, and it hit it like a ton of bricks because it was the year after I retired. Now, my last season, I played a game against the Dallas Cowboys, and I got knocked out. Like, I was unconscious. I got hit by DeMarcus Ware. He came down and hit me across the head. I was unconscious. I fumbled. They recovered. Incidentally, that was the game that Drew Bledsoe gave way to Tony Romo, because right after I fumbled, he threw a red zone interception to Sam Madison. After halftime, Tony Romo came back out and was the quarterback. But also after that interception, I went right back on the field. I was unconscious, and 3 plays later, I'm standing in the backfield, ready to go. Nowadays, they take your helmet, and they prevent you from damaging yourself. So, it is an option for players to report whether or not they're dinged. I see this every single game. There's a guy, he gets crushed, he gets up, and he's aware of this, right? Because he doesn't want to be Wally pipped or whatever he wants to. He's aware that he's concussed, and you see him start going, oh, my shoulder, oh man, I hit my shoulder, oh, my shoulder, or it's like, oh, my back, so they're faking it to gather themselves. They're faking another injury to gather themselves because they don't want to opt out of playing. Because once you do that, you go to the sideline, they take your helmet. They put you in a concussion protocol where you go into the tent, you take a series of tests. Maybe if it's bad enough, they take you inside and you have to take a baseline test, and then you're done. Now you're done for the game, and you might be done for a week or 2. And so what I've started to see is that unless you are unconscious, a lot of these players are not actually being, covered correctly as it pertains to repeated head trauma. The problem is that everything that happens in the NFL trickles down. So you start to see this in college. I see it in college too. I'm sure it happens in high school. And it's worse in high schools because half of the high schools in this country don't have a medical professional on the sideline. And so it's dependent upon the head coach or a parent to come screaming out of the stands to make sure that their kid is okay. And so the NFL has done, I think, all that they can. The problem is that we are knuckleheads. Like, football players are knuckleheads. They don't want to leave the football field because they realize as soon as they leave the football field, their opportunity might be gone. And that's what happens when you don't have guaranteed contracts. I hate to say it, but unless you have a huge signing bonus, a lot of football players are at-will employees. You can be fired or cut at any time. And sometimes if you do have a signing bonus, they'll cut you. So I think the NFL has done a lot. The only way that it gets better, like truly better, is if there are guarantees against concussive type injuries, forcing you to lose your position on a team and your contract.
Thank you, Tiki.
Hey, Tiki, Jason Eckhart, how are you?
What's up, Jason?
Hey, so I will preface this real quick. I am an Eagles fan. But with that being said, I think the fact that you've earned my respect over the years of how well you performed should be something to be admired. So
the reality is you actually hate my brother more than you hate me. That's what
exactly.
I say.
Let's not bring that up.
I have to, man. He scored the last touchdown in the vet. I mean, I have to bring it up.
Jeez Louise. You know what? I'm going to change my line of thinking now. No. Two questions, a 2-part. One's hopefully an easy one, but from a resiliency end, Scott asked that question early, how you clearly perform better later in your career, but you also had, some fumble issues early on. And I know you've spoken out about those to help some younger folks and that, but I guess generally speaking, part one is, where did that kind of resiliency come from? So obviously you took that to heart, you improved and clearly, stepped it up. And then at the end, you can answer this. Who's truly your most hated team? Is it Cowboys? Is it Eagles?
It's always the Cowboys. It's always the Cowboys. Just to answer your second question first. So I grew up a Washington fan. Same with me. Right? I grew up loving the Washington at the time Redskins, and I had friends that I went to high school with that loved the Cowboys. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, how do you like the Cowboys? And so it was clearly because they were front runners and they were buying into America's team, right? And so the Cowboys, even though they weren't as big of a rival as the Philadelphia Eagles when I was playing, they were the team that I despised the most. The resiliency,
we're aligned there.
Yeah, exactly. So the resiliency, and by the way, I think it was absolutely respect with the Philadelphia Eagles. In fact, my first game of my career was the Eagles in 1997. My last game of my career was also against the Eagles, a playoff game. And so when I retired, basically that last game, Brian Dawkins gave me this big hug, and he's like, "Man, you're a warrior. We're gonna miss you. We're gonna miss competing against you." So it was, it's I have this like weird, bittersweet, like love hate, actually despise hate relationship / respect with the Philadelphia Eagles fans. The resiliency comes from, I think, my mom. She was a single mom growing up in Southwest Virginia, and I watched her struggle, and I didn't realize it until I was older. But I knew that no matter what, she would find a way to provide for us. And if we needed, these running spikes from East Bay magazine. You guys remember East Bay magazine?
Oh, yeah.
If we needed the running spikes, she would find a way to do it. And there was just this innate like accomplishment that always happened with my mom, and I never wanted to let her down. So I think a lot of it comes from her, but also it comes from my brother. I have a identical twin, who was very successful, and if he was successful and I wasn't, it kind of made me feel bad, and vice versa. So we pushed each other really our entire professional lives. So I've had some good influences to help me do it.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hey, Tiki, it's Mark Noodleberg. Appreciate you being here with us today. You said something that was really intriguing to me. You didn't get it for the first early part of your career. Yeah. And I had a 10-year career as a college football coach, so I would constantly talk to the players that I was coaching about what it took to be a pro, what it meant, the behaviors that went into a full day, not just showing up to practice. So how did that change for you when you became an entrepreneur? What does that behavior look like to be a professional in the business world as opposed to the athletic world? Because it's something that I see going back and forth on a daily basis. So I'd love to hear your take on it.
So it's a great question. I didn't really learn how to be a professional until Greg Camella used to grind me in my off seasons. We'd go run this hill out in Ramapo, New Jersey, and it sucked. I mean, it wasn't like a steep, like crazy hill to climb, but it was like a steady, like pain in the butt, and I always wanted to quit, but he would never let me quit. And so like that persistence that he developed or helped me develop is something that I carried over into my career, and then ultimately carried over into my business career. Sorry, there's people demolishing in my basement right now, so if you hear sound in the background, that's what that is. And so once I became an entrepreneur, and I mentioned that I wasn't always successful. My first business was with Steve Ross, interestingly enough, who I mentioned earlier, in affordable housing. He's known as a commercial real estate developer, and he's done amazing things around the city and really around the country, including on the Miami Dolphins now. But a lot of his early work was in affordable housing, and he was going to buy a portfolio in Virginia that was based out of my hometown in Roanoke. And so we partnered. The problem was the correction happened a year after we partnered with him, and we were about to, meaning my side of the business, was about to take a bath. Thankfully, he saved me and let me out of the deal. He personally guaranteed it. Obviously, the market turned around, and Steve Ross, as Steve Ross always does, found a way to be successful. But the relationship that came from that failure was something that I held on to. And so when Mark Gerson and myself started Thuzio, our seed investor was Steve Ross. And so it's like everything that happens, good or bad, it creates an experience, it creates a relationship, and you have to use those as best you can. The most important thing that I came from football that pertains to business is resiliency and adaptability and finding a way to reinvent yourself. So I was a small, injury-prone running back. I turned into this all-purpose guy because of Sean Payton. When Coach Coughlin came, I turned into I got really strong. I turned into this powerful, tackle breaker who could go the distance. And so I was constantly reinventing myself. The same thing happens in business. Thuzio started as a marketplace. If you or any businesses that you were associated with wanted to book an athlete to do anything, play golf, go to dinner, give a speech, whatever, you'd come to us and we would manage a transaction. The problem was we were touching every transaction. which is impossible. Like you can't scale if you touch every transaction. And so we had to pivot. And so we just kept pivoting and pivoting and pivoting, reinventing ourselves until we came to what we ultimately are now. 2 companies, one's an influencer marketing company called Julius, and Thuzio is the event company that we're running and obviously doing a lot of virtual events. So I think it's a couple of things. You know, one is valuing the relationship that you're building, success or failure. And then 2, you have to reinvent yourself, and you can't have too much pride and ownership. Like, this is me, I'm doing it my way. This is the only way to get it done. When in actuality, there's probably someone smarter than you or that has had experience better than you that can help you along the way. That's how we've done it at Thuzio, and it's worked for us.
Thank you.
You're welcome, bud.
I see a bunch of hands up, so just jump right on in.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Tiki.
What's up?
Tiki, thanks for joining us. I'm tempted to ask, how did David Tyree hang on to that damn ball?
No idea, because he was not a great receiver. He was a great special teams player, but he was not a great receiver.
Crushed me. But instead, I'd love to hear about the cannabis space and how you get in that.
Yeah, so I met a guy at actually I was doing a thing for Governor Murphy. He actually was before he was Governor Murphy, and it was an event. It was open to the public. It was at a local venue here in New Jersey, and this guy came up to me and is like, I think you might enjoy hearing about the cannabis space. And at first I was like, dude, I don't smoke weed. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, great. If you want to open a dispensary, fantastic. But it wasn't really in line with what my business objectives were or anything that I had an interest in. But then the more we got together about a week later, the more we started to talk, the more I saw the medicinal use of marijuana being beneficial, especially to athletes and really to people who don't realize it, but they're self-medicating. And I think a big part of why so many athletes over the years have used cannabis, marijuana specifically, is because you start to realize how opioids, whether it was Indocin or Naproxen or Toradol, whatever it is, these things that they would give us, it's affecting you. And I remember this came like really forward in my mind when they told me, I think it was my fifth year, because I had a lot of injuries. I was telling you, my knees were swollen all the time, so I was always taking these anti-inflammatories. They said, we're going to start blood testing you every week so that we can check your liver function. I'm like, wait, hold on. Why are you checking my liver function? And it was because of the amount of opioids that I was using. And so I stopped cold turkey. The hardest thing I ever took from that point on, and I just dealt with the pain, was Tylenol. And so I know from personal experience, and then also from talking to some of my former teammates, that they would smoke weed because they didn't want to take these opioids, and they knew how to control it or control their anxiety, or even like calming down. When you play an NFL game, right, it's like yours is a high, like you can't come off of it. And so what guys end up doing is they go grab a handle of something and they start drinking alcohol, which makes it worse. It actually compounds the like the bruising and the head trauma. It all is compounded by alcohol. CBD has chemicals that mesh differently with our body, and so that's why the NFL has finally gotten rid of it as a punishable crime, so to speak. And you've seen other sports do it as well. And so we moved into the space, one, as an educational bend for me, and then we were going to find an economic avenue to attack it with. But the challenge is in New Jersey, it's really, really slow. It's really hard to get dispensaries. In fact, there are a couple that have already been approved but are on hold because there's a court case because they were too close to one another. It had to be equally distributed throughout the state. So it's a tough business, but it's an interesting one because of the long-term benefits that it's going to provide when it's ultimately legal. The challenge, and this is what I'm focused on, is focusing on the medicinal side, not necessarily the recreational side, even though I'm not against it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hey, Tiki.
What's up, man?
Hey, how are you? I am a huge Rob Anderson.
Yeah,
I am
of course,
a huge Giant fan from the days of Joe Morris and sitting watching him run with my dad and
Nice.
Rodney Hampton, and then the Thunder and Lightning days of you and Dane.
That's right.
Were just awesome, man. So first and foremost, thank you. Because you made Sunday nights a lot more and Sunday afternoons a lot more tolerable.
I appreciate that, man.
And exciting to be able to go to school on Monday wearing my gear. As a young guy, you have a big family. We have 4 kids. I would love to hear about your habits and routines that you instill and you share with your kids. And I would love to hear about year 1 and 2 after retirement.
Yeah.
How did you start to scratch that itch of competition and training and nutrition, and how did you make that transition?
Yeah, 2 really good questions. I'll start with the last one. So I got real busy right away. So most Giants fans know that even when I was playing, I was doing media. I mean, I started back in 2000, actually probably before that, 1999, working at WFAN, doing overnights with Joe Beningo from 10 to 1 in the morning, talking about hockey in my off seasons. I was like, dude, I don't know I have no idea what you people are talking about. But I had the bug because I learned that I could talk and that I could, have these conversations with people. And it led ultimately to my career post the NFL, which was at the Today Show, after stints at Yes Network and Fox News, doing Fox and Friends in the morning. And so I transitioned pretty easily because I never stopped, right? I retired. My last game was, I think, January of 2007, which was the Eagles playoff game that I was alluding to. And in April, I was introduced as a correspondent on the Today Show. In fact, my first day was that horrific shooting down at Virginia Tech. And they sent me down there because they knew that I grew up near the Blacksburg area. My mom and dad obviously went to Virginia Tech as Hokies. And so my very first day, I was on this massive news story, and it was overwhelming. I had no idea what I was doing, but just kind of make it work. So the transition out of sports was busy for me. The itch for playing the game was hard. Especially after I was also working on Football Night on America on NBC. And so I'd see these guys getting ready, and like I could feel like anxiety. Like I was like the Giants were getting ready to play whoever. I feel like nervousness, like I was still getting ready to go out there and play. And like I had this vested interest, even though I had no interest in it other than being a fan anymore. So it almost put me in a fan's state of mind. And I combated it by diving into other things. And for a while it was SoulCycle and spinning and staying active that way. But then ultimately, and if you look to now, I run marathons. I've done 13 marathons, and I run almost every day. It's something that just has become a way for me to escape and have my own time. So that's how I filled that athletic void. As far as my kids are concerned and how I pass these things down, it's simple with AJ, because AJ is my oldest. He's 18 years old. He remembers. He was 4 when I retired, so he remembers being on the football field. He remembers even more seeing his uncle Rondé, because we go to Buccaneers games, and so we're sitting at a game. He's like detailed into what's happening on the field, and I can just talk to him because he remembers that I used to do it. So there's an experience that he knows is there from me, and he picked it up. It's why he's so competitive. It's why he's had so much success at Greenwich High School these last couple of years. My younger son, who's 16, and interestingly, he's 6'5". I don't know who his mom or dad was, but he's 6'5". He's a little bit different because he's more aloof. He knows that he didn't really see the hard work. He just knows that he has some affluence. You know what I mean? He has some privilege, some advantage, and he's a little bit lazy in some regards. But he's really good at what he does, and so it's just once he gets motivated, he knows he can dominate because he's 6'5" and he's lean and he's put together and he's a smart kid. And so it's 2 different methodologies. One just happens easily. The other one is kind of like I got to cajole him and tell him why it's important for him to work hard. So it's different strokes for my different kids. Interestingly, as I told you, I have 6. So my 10-year-old twins, they're 10. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. My 6-year-old, Brooklyn, is in competitive cheer. And if you think like baseball and football is intense, go to a competitive cheer. It's like, what in the world is going on here?
They go down to Disney and they travel.
Oh man, it's kind of awesome, like to see it, but it's also like, whoa, what the hell?
It's funny. I so appreciate you saying all that because I just dropped my son off at Brunswick for his first day of high school today.
Oh, that's great, man.
And,
good luck to him.
Thank you so much. And I completely relate to just having the different kids, and you just need a different program, if you would. You need a different book to get them all to where they you believe they can have an opportunity to be at least. So it's really amazing and humbling to hear you say that. So thank you.
My pleasure, Rob. What's up, Steve?
Tiki, first of all, thanks for joining. You know, you did not disappoint. I love hearing your story. I had a sports marketing company for years and lived that. How do we scale it? Because I represented a bunch of coaches, but couldn't be involved in every transaction. My question for you today is, when Thuzio started, you were doing something really unique in the sports marketing space, putting guys in non-traditional settings. It was really cool. I have been to a few. I heard Scott talk about a bunch. What's your gut as to when it would go back to in-person events versus virtual? Because I'm speaking at virtual events all over the place now. It's much more efficient. We can scale that pretty easy, but there's still not that, hey, I was shaking hands or in the huddle with somebody. So I'm just curious what your take is on that.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons that the short answer to the question is, I don't think it's going to be until next spring at the earliest, until we're able to feel comfortable around one another again. That's at the earliest. But you're right. There's something about like intimacy, and I'm not meaning this in any kind of sexual way, but just like intimacy, like feeling someone's emotion, or getting their hand and giving them a hug, or feeling whatever like emotion they're drawing from the conversation that you're having. It's special, right? Some people are able to communicate it through a screen, but a lot of people aren't, right? They feel detached and you're just listening and you're not feeling it. And so I agree with you. Like, one of the reasons that we love Thuzio, even though it's a hard margin business, it's not something that's going to make us rich, but we're creating like relationships, whether it's with our guests of honor, with the members who have some sort of affinity towards them, or it's the members themselves in the room who see each other, week over week or year over year or event over event, and they start to learn about each other, and it just creates this intimacy that it's hard to find that in life. I used to find it easily because I was involved in sports, right? You're in a locker room, there's, 53 guys, it's you learn about their moms or dads or kids. You just develop these relationships. But once you leave that type of environment, or even once you leave your work environment, how do you find those type of relationships? And so one of the theses of Thuzio is it's about contact. It's about having relationship, because that's the key to life.
One of the interesting takeaways, and what we're hearing, is that people don't get to take that photo that always happens at that event. So the memory of the event, the takeaway, isn't there like it normally would.
Yeah, so, the photo tells the story, right?
Correct, exactly.
The photo tells the story. And even
just like that football that you handed off, that physical thing that made it what it was. So
it tells the story.
My last question, if I can just throw it out there, is how do you pick the cities you expand? Because if you ever come to South Florida, my son Mark and I would love to be involved with you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
We had talks with some of your people about being the sort of South Florida representative, but
that's right.
It would be really cool.
We will be there eventually. We believe that we can be in any city that houses a football team or multiple sports teams, more specifically. Not that we are competing necessarily. I don't use that word, competing, with live sports, but in a sense we are. A lot of the business community, whether it's a financial advisor or a small business owner, is competing for the attention of their client. And what we believe Thuzio does is give an easy way to entertain a client. And I know you love Lawrence Taylor. where I'm going to this event with Lawrence Taylor. It's going to be us in a room with 150 people. Why don't you come? It's a very different proposition than, hey, I have tickets to the Giants versus the Bengals. Yeah, it's probably going to be a blowout, and it might be 3 degrees below zero. But hey, why don't you come? We'll have a couple beers. And by the way, you're going to be gone for 7 hours out of your day, right? It's sometimes it's interesting. Other times, you'd rather just go hang out with Lawrence Taylor for a couple hours, right?
He is one to hang out with too.
That's
man.
right. That's right.
Fun, man.
So that's our proposition. That's what we sell against. But we believe that can happen in any city that houses at least two sports franchises. And so that's basically how we have determined it. Now, we started, interestingly, just as an aside, we started in LA. We did probably 8 to 10 months in LA. We pulled out of it because it wasn't working. But now that they now have two football teams to go along with the 2 basketball teams that are all compelling, we're actually now back in Los Angeles. So it's really about the fan bases being engaged with the legends of those cities.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think we've got we've got 15 minutes, and I think we've got 3 questions lined up. So we are going to start, I think, with Mayan, and then go to Megan and Karen to wrap it up.
Hey, my name is Mayan. Great to be here with you today. Really grateful for it. My question is around, you talking about all the pivoting that you did with Thuzio, and I was wondering, what are some of the things that stood out to you as being really important that allowed you to continue pivoting without completely failing until you did find that successful area?
All right, so there are 2 very important things that happen with Thuzio. Number 1, my partner is fantastic. So whoever you partner with, he has to be a rock star. When you're in a new business, if you're starting something that's existing and you're just perfecting the gadget, that's one thing. But nobody was doing what we were doing the way that we were doing it. So in a sense, we had first mover advantage, but we also had first mover disadvantage because we were going to make all the mistakes, right? I have a great partner, Mark Gerson. And so when we get to that point where, man, we gotta figure this out and we're running out of money, he would re-up, right? So we had financial stability, and once we started raising money, it was all strategic money. What I mean by strategic, it was people who saw the vision and were invested in the vision, not the profit, right? They weren't driving us to profitability. If we'd have been driven to profitability, we probably would have folded 2 or 3 years in, maybe less than 2 or 3 years in to the business. So we had great partners, number 1. Number 2, we listened to our clients. And people say this, it's a cliche, like listen to your clients. But how we ultimately became into the company we are is because we had a relationship with Dan Kaplan, who was a partner in Ernst & Young. We were pitching him an idea about doing some events at Ernst & Young. And they had the Super Bowl. Remember the Super Bowl back in 2016, I believe it was? Whichever one the Broncos, or the Seahawks destroyed the Broncos.
I'm a Seahawks fan. I lived in Seattle my whole life, so totally.
Right. So that Super Bowl, Ernst & Young had a dilemma. They could spend whatever it was, $400,000 on a professional service sponsorship for the Super Bowl, or they could spend a fraction of that and do some events in their offices. And ultimately, we were able to convince them that, hey, do some events in your offices. And we were able to book Steve Young and Dan Marino and Phil Simms and a few others who came into this event. Actually, it was 4 events throughout the week, and they loved it. And so all of a sudden, we knew what they wanted. As a business, they needed something to bring their top clients to their office, right? Not go to Giant Stadium or whatever it was, MetLife Stadium, and watch a football game, but bring their top clients to their office. And so we said, why don't we replicate this? And that's how Thuzio, as it exists, it became a business because our client was asking for something that we weren't providing, but ultimately found a way to provide. So partnering well, and it's a cliche, but you got to listen to what your client, who you think your potential client what they actually want.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Megan, you
Hi.
are up.
Hello. Thank you so much, Scott. Hi, Tiki. I'm Megan Riley. Nice to meet you.
Hello, Megan.
Hey, I had a question because I'm so interested in how diverse you, like the different worlds you have been in. And I feel like there's got to be, like, a lot of people like, I'm diverse. I have 2 businesses. You, like, Broadway is like, that's like a different planet. And so what I'm curious, like, there's not very many people with that kind of experience. So I'm curious from you, what advantages, what edge that extreme diversity has given you in your life?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Megan. So first of all, you know, there's that cliche, you know, live in New York City once, but get out before it makes you crazy type of thing. Well, I believed in that. And when I first came to New York, or came to Jersey, because obviously we play in Jersey, we're not New Yorkers by any sense of the imagination.
Right.
I lived in New York, though. I lived on the Upper East Side. And as a result, I ended up getting taken in by certain people. One being Bob Tisch, who's now passed away back in 2005, but he was the part owner of the Giants. And he would just introduce me to people. Like even, so Governor Pataki was doing an event. Now, Pataki's obviously a Republican, but Bob Tisch is a humongous Democrat. And so he's like, Teak, I'm going to pick you up and we're going to go to this event and you're going to moderate and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, all right, cool, but why are we going? And he says, because he's going to win. And it was interesting psychology that I learned from being in New York and who you could interact with. As a result, I ended up, you know, being in front of crowds and meeting, you know, the head of Fox News, who then hired me, who then introduced me to Tony Snow, who then goes and, you know, becomes the press secretary for President Bush, who then gets sick and he leaves the White House, but then he goes doing a radio show, and I talk to him every Thursday on the radio show because he wanted to have some sports as opposed to just politics all the time. And then one day he's like, hey, you know who wants to meet you? I'm like, who? He said, Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. I'm like, get the hell out of here. So 6 months later, I'm having lunch at the State Department with Secretary of State Rice. So like the relationships like that happen when you insert yourself into the places that they can be. And some people feel like uncomfortable, but I think I've never felt uncomfortable. Maybe that's just because I was as an athlete, but I think having a confidence to be wherever you are and be present wherever you are is what's allowed me to have opportunities to say yes or no to. Just like with Broadway, you know, I did some Broadway acting, small time acting, because I wanted to find my voice when I knew I was going to transition into sports media. And this woman did a play. Her name was Peggy Lewis. It was called Women of Manhattan. I played a character named Duke. I had one scene. We did 16 performances. It was fantastic, but people saw it. And so 8 or 10 years later, maybe even longer, Kinky Boots is going to close. They like doing walk-on roles, meaning just show up for a day, put on the boots, dance a little bit, and go home. But they knew that I had experience being an actor. They said, well, would you like an actual role because we have someone who's leaving for 7 weeks? I said yes. I was there at the right time, and it changed my life. So I think it's being in the right place to experience opportunities, and then when they come, don't say no. Even if you're not unsure, don't say no, at least not right away.
I love it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Megan.
Karen, I think you are taking us home.
Right on. I love it. Thanks, Scott, for hosting this. Tiki, great to meet you. Karen Charchan. I work with military and elite athletes who are transitioning from sport to their next careers.
Nice.
And, you know, they really struggle often with that sense of identity that they have and they're losing. And it sounds to me like you've obviously transitioned really well. And it sounds like you were developing some of those skills while you were still in sport.
Yeah.
What other advice or even challenges that you came across would you want to, you know, discuss with those athletes and potentially military even? Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. And I appreciate your work that you do with our military servicemen and women, and thank all of them for their service. So I've had a few experiences with the military. Back around September 11th, after September 11th, the USO was doing a lot of tours welcoming troops homes, and they asked me to go up in an F-18 out of Norfolk
which was unreal. And so I had to go down there and train a couple of days, and I ultimately did it. And I had a lieutenant, his name was Lieutenant Holler, and he took me, I mean, when you're so high that you can see the curvature of the earth, and he's barrel rolling you and doing all these things, it's like perspective that you don't even know exists, right? And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate the experiences that I've had with them. And he didn't make me sick, by the way. He's like, we usually try to make you celebrities sick and throw up and stuff, but I was nice to him, so he kind of just took it easy on me.
Right.
But that transition is one of the hardest, and it's you nailed it. A lot of athletes and military men and women live this intense existence. I mean, it is like heavy and loud and emotional and physical. It's like, it's so intense. And then all of a sudden you leave it, and it's like, no matter what you do, it doesn't compare, right? You can't even get close to it. And so what I learned was, when I was playing, as much as I hated doing it, I often had to divorce myself from my existence, right? So, hanging out with the guys all the time, I wouldn't do it. I would do it sometimes, but I wouldn't do it all the time. Or, going to that big party. Sometimes I would do it, other times I wouldn't. So forcing yourself to divorce, even though you're not really divorcing, it's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, to pull away was so critical for me, so that when I left the game, it wasn't foreign. It wasn't like I was searching for an identity or searching for a new friend. And I gave this specific advice to Steven Jackson once, who was a running back for at the time, St. Louis Rams. And his girl, who does his marketing, Alfina, came to me and was like, how did you do it? Like, how did you transition so easy? It seemed like it was seamless for you. And I said, give Steven this advice. Tell him to stop hanging out with the cool kids and hang out with the rich kids. Because when you're not cool anymore, the cool kids aren't going to want to hang out with you. But those rich friends, those rich kids, they're going to be with you for a long time. And I didn't mean it like literally cool and rich, but it's really those who are not with you because you're cool. It's those who have some other, I don't know, opportunity. Yeah, like just opportunistic reason to be friends with you. Right? Mm-hmm. Those people are invaluable because they'll stay with you. When you're not going to the clubs, you can't get them into the hottest restaurant. You can't do XYZ. You're not making $5 million a year. Some of those friends will fall away. When you're not wearing the uniform and the big wig on military grounds or wherever you walk, it's some of those people will walk away from you. You got to find those that'll stick with you regardless. It's hard. It's not easy to do, but you keep your eyes open for that, and it makes the transition a little bit easier.
Right on. Hey, thanks, Tiki.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely phenomenal. Tiki, I cannot thank you enough. You've always been there. When I've needed you, I'll never forget this. So I was leaving a position as a chief revenue officer that I had held for 17 years to start my business, Something New. And I was actually going to go to lunch with Mark Gershon. Yeah. And the president of Thuzio. And I'll never forget this. I walked in the door to your office, and you came up, gave me a hug, said congratulations. And just that support has always meant the world to me. When we put our first book out for charity, Standing O, and I asked for a cover quote, it was boom, done deal. And despite the fact that Tiki's got like 17 jobs, 100 kids, everything else going on in his life, I said, hey, can you come on this Conversations With series? And it was immediate, absolutely. So I think you've seen what an amazing person he is. And I can't thank you enough, Tiki. Whatever we can do to support you, it's going to be fun. You're so young to see kind of where this journey takes you. So thanks again. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Scott. Life is the friends and relationships you make. So thank you for being a friend, my friend.
You got it. Thanks, Tiki.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, Tiki.
Thank you, Tiki.
Be well, everyone.
You be well, too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Darren's got a smile on his face. Happy Giants fan.
Very much so.
Thank you guys for coming. More surprises to come. We've got a great lineup of people ready to come in, and each time I think, wow, Jesse was amazing or Jason was amazing, and it's just it's fun to bring these folks in, and you guys are really what make it work, because it's not just a monologue, it's that interaction, which makes it really cool. So I appreciate you guys carving out time in your day to spend some time with us and to meet somebody like Tiki. So I would just say, like I always do, like continue to support each other, support Tiki, get to know him. He's an amazing guy. He's like I said, he's always been there for me. So continue to support each other, and we will see you guys next month. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scotty.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Scott.
Well,
Thanks,
everybody.
Scott.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.